Hey everyone, welcome to Roman Just Codes. I am Roman, Google developer expert in Flutter, and in this video I will show you how to build the UI portion of the Twitter Spaces feature. You know, that feature that Twitter copied from Clubhouse? Wait, you say I shouldn't be saying that? That Twitter copied from Clubhouse, even though they did? Okay, that's fine. I'll just scratch that. You know, that feature in Twitter where a bunch of people all over the world just come together and talk, listen, and learn from each other in real time. Pretty much a copy of Clubhouse. We will build out the bottom sheet that slides up, shows all the users in the space, their statuses of whether they're muted or speaking, as well as one of the main features, the Twitter emojis. I will show you how to build the EmojiSelector, as well as trigger the multiple actions that display each emoji inside of the user's bubble. No additional libraries other than the provider package. In this video, you will learn about communication between widgets using a very simple yet powerful state management strategy such as provider, creating custom widgets, as well as explicit animations. Well, we have a lot to cover, so let's get started.
Let's start off by creating a brand new project called Flutter Twitter Space. Run the sample project to make sure everything is in order. Go ahead and create a simple folder structure for assets and fonts. We'll use these emoji images in sample profile images later in the project. Create a simple folder structure for the app. We need helpers, models, pages, services, and widgets. Update the pubspec.yaml to import the assets and custom fonts. Create a helper file to map the fonts to icon data properties. Add another helper class to hold the colors used throughout this app. Refactor the main.dart into a root widget called Twitter Space App. As the home widget, create a custom widget called Twitter Space Home, which will encapsulate all the functionality. Flesh it out as a scaffold with a child widget called Glowing Effect. This glowing effect widget will be a stateful widget with a glowing animation controlled by a single animation controller, and it will consist of a few container widgets stacked on top of each other with some staggering animations applied to them. We'll use one single animation controller and two explicit animation widgets, Fade Transition and Scale Transition. We'll add tapping capabilities by using a gesture detector so users can reuse it as a button. We'll use a show modal bottom sheet to replicate the Twitter Space modal effect. We'll create a custom widget called Twitter Space Modal, which will encapsulate the functionality of the modal. This will be a stateless widget since it won't rebuild itself beyond the initial display with a very straightforward vertical inner structure. This will pretty much house all the other inner features, which I'll split into other widgets, such as the header, the title, the conversation, and the footer. The Twitter Space header widget will be a simple widget just representing the header portion of the modal, with the button spaced out and mocked up just like the real deal. You can hook them up to events to close the modal if you want. The Twitter Space title widget will be yet another widget that will represent the title portion of the modal with a very simple structure. In here, I'll make use of text spans to mix text styles within the same text line. Pretty useful. The Twitter Space footer, as the name implies, represents the footer portion of the Twitter Space modal. Some of these items will be mocked up, with the exception of the button that will trigger the EmojiSelector later on. Here, I show you how to create a custom button just using an icon, a container wrapped inside an inkwell, and a material, then clipped with a clip oval. You can use a button from the library, but I created this here to give you an idea if you want to roll your own. I created here also a message badge with a pill-like shape. Isn't it cool what you can do with a container in just a few simple decoration properties? Looking good so far. Let's proceed with the meat of this feature, the Twitter Space Conversation widget, which will occupy the middle section. The Twitter Space Conversation widget will be the heart of this app, which will contain the core of this functionality. All users' avatars displayed in a grid-like fashion with scrollable capabilities. 4 columns and as many rows as users we can display. I'll also create some supporting models to hold the data for our users in the form of Dart classes. I'll have a user model which will pretty much encapsulate the essence of a Twitter Space user. I'll create a utils helper class to create some synthetic user data to hydrate this app and populate the Twitter Space conversation widget. I want each user in the Twitter Space conversation widget to be a widget on its own, with its own life cycle and animations encapsulated. That's why I need a new custom widget called Twitter User. This widget will hold the avatar image, the emoji animations, and the user speaking status. Like I mentioned, even the speaking status I want as a separate widget, since this will render accordingly based on the speaking status of the user, whether they're muted, speaking, or simply a listener. This widget will conditionally display its status accordingly. For when the user is speaking, I want to create a small yet pretty useful widget, the one that displays the little sound waves. I'll call it just that, Twitter Space Sound Waves. For this widget, I could have brought a Lottie file or something already animated, but I kind of wanted to show you how simple you can do this yourself without importing any other additional packages or files. This will be pretty much just several container widgets animated along their height, using two animation controllers for the even and odd tiny bars. I make one repeat, the other repeat in reverse, that way they stagger their animations. You can keep poking at it, but for my purposes, this is good enough. Now I want to refactor the whole avatar portion of the Twitter user. Right here where we display the user's picture, we want the emojis to display. We don't want any other widget to be affected by its rebuilding process, so let's isolate it as a separate widget called Twitter User Avatar. The trick here is to use a stack with the user image clipped as a circle and overlay the Twitter emojis right on top. You know what? I'll refactor this widget to be stateless. I don't need to rebuild at this level. I may revert this change later if needed. What I'll create is an entity that will represent the many different emojis I'll support and display. And instead of hard coding them or making them constant strings, I'll make them into an enumeration, since they will be a group of related items. So I'll make an enum called Emojis that map to each of my emojis. A service called EmojiService will be needed to serve as the entity that will broadcast the emoji being broadcasted to a Twitter user. I'll also need some sort of envelope that will encapsulate the emoji message. That envelope will hold the emoji to be displayed, the user to send it to, so I'll make it a PODO class. For my testing purposes, I'll hard code it to always send it to the first user, which is me in this case. We need somebody to listen to the broadcasted emoji messages, so I'll use a consumer widget, subscribe to the emoji service, which will be broadcasting emoji messages being sent. I'm gonna need the provider package, so I'll install it real quick. I'll use a multi-provider widget to inject all of my services at the root of the widget structure. All I need to check is whether I am the user to which the emoji message is destined, just by looking into the metadata in the emoji message associated to my user ID. Simple as that. Now that I think about it, I think I'll make my Twitter user avatar back to being a stateful widget, since I need to hold a reference in memory to the list of emoji icons being displayed. So yeah, I'm backtracking just a bit. The stack will simply render widgets being added to a child collection and remove them from the widget tree using a unique identifier as their animations finish. Now I'll create a whole separate widget just for each emoji animation itself, called Twitter Emoji Animation. Each Twitter emoji animation widget then will manage its own animation internally, its own lifecycle, etc. It will expose an API that will notify when its animation is done, so the parent container, in this case the stack in the Twitter user avatar widget, can safely remove it from the tree. This widget will use two controllers working in tandem to build the sequence of animations required to achieve the Twitter Space emoji animation, such as the scaling from the center, the shrinking to half its size and moving it to the top corner, and then just shrinking out of view. We'll use a simple structure just showing the corresponding emoji image from our assets. Let me do a simulation in the emoji service and do it in a timer, just sending a random emoji to my first user. we'll use 2 scale transition widgets and 1 slide transition widget, working in conjunction and playing off of each other to achieve that animation sequence. The key here will be properly executing the animations in the right sequence, using timers to hold off the next animation and triggering it at the right time. This may not look like a super elegant solution, but it gets the job done at a very low cost. Do the required tweaks as needed to achieve the intended result. Make it now so everyone gets an emoji, so expand on that simulation. The cool thing about this is that the behavior of each emoji is completely encapsulated and efficient in terms of how they get executed in relation to all of the other widgets in the hierarchy. So I love the way this came out. We have a few more things to wrap up, so stay for the next part. After every emoji animation is done, I need to do the proper cleanup in the Twitter user avatar. So as I receive notifications that emojis are done animating, I'd like to remove them from the stack, as they shouldn't be hanging around holding precious memory. Now for our last widget, the EmojiSelector widget will be the widget that will trigger the desired emojis as you tap on their images. This will sit right on top of the Twitter Space conversation, so we'll use a stack for it. We'll build it out as a row of image asset widgets, displaying the corresponding image off of the emoji enumeration values. I'll just add a bit of material style magic just to make them tappable and having the inkwell effect. A simple scale transition animation would do for this widget. The Emoji Selector service will do just that, serve the needs of the emoji selector. I'll use it to trigger its visibility and thus triggering the corresponding animation by using a flag to drive the logic. Using a consumer to listen for changes in this service, I'll check if the selector has been marked as visible. Then I'll trigger the animation forward, otherwise I'll reverse it. Simple as that. And I'll hook up each emoji to send the selected emoji via the emoji service, but first I'll mark it not visible. In the footer widget, I'll hook up the toggling of the emoji selector visibility by using the service I just created. And check it out, a fully functional emoji selector widget. Pretty neat. To be quite honest, I can do this all day just clicking on this thing. I came up with it under a few hours, so I just wanted to show you how I built it. I hope you all had a blast just watching me fly through its creation. Make sure to grab the repo link from the description. Thanks everyone for watching.
And that's it. In this video, you saw how I approached the development of that Twitter feature called Spaces from the UI standpoint. Now it's up to you to come up with the parts that feed the actual data coming from connected users, streaming audio, and the rest of the features. I had a lot of fun building this UI. And again, no additional libraries other than the provider package and of course, a few hours to spare. See you on the next one and stay tuned for more videos from Roman Just Codes. Hey there, I am Roman from Roman Just Codes. I hope that you found the content of this video very useful, and if you did, make sure to like it and subscribe to this channel. You know subscribing to this channel is free, right? Thank you so much for watching.